Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. The Shahed 136 drones, that have been variously termed as the kamikaze drones or the suicide drones, have dominated the headlines this past week. In the battle for the dominance of the Ukrainian skies, the Shahed drones have changed the terms of engagement. They fly low down to the ground and are very hard for the radars to spot. And what the radars cannot spot, the air defense systems cannot shoot down. Manufactured by the Iranian Shahed aviation industries, the Shahed drones are loitering ammunition that operate as a swarm. They are fired off a launch rack in batches of 5 to overwhelm ground targets and to consume air defense resources. The delta-shaped Shahed drones were revealed for the very first time in December 2021. They are relatively cheap, each costing about $20,000. They have a range of anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 kilometers. They fly at a maximum speed of 185 kilometers per hour. Each drone can carry a warhead of about 20 kilograms and relies on either the GPS or the Russian GLONASS navigation system for mid-flight maneuvering. The Shahed drones sound like a moped or a lawnmower and have proven to be devastating in their assault capabilities. In the past, Iran has supplied drones to the Hezbollah to be used against Israel, to the Houthis to strike targets against Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, to the Shiite militia groups in Iraq who have struck Iraqi and American targets. In the month of May earlier this year, the Iranian state media showed off hundreds of attack military drones in an underground facility in the heart of the Zakros Mountains. Iran also showed off its Ababil 5 drones, named after the miraculous birds that are mentioned in the Holy Quran. Now, the Ababil 5 is fitted with the Qaim 9 missiles, which are said to be the Iranian-made version of the air-to-surface US Hellfire missiles. Iran has been developing its drones technology for decades now, and it claims that it has the most powerful drone fleet in the whole of West Asia. But the original pioneer for using drones in combat is the United States of America. After its invasion of Afghanistan, the United States used its bluntly named MQ-1 Predator drone to regularly bomb targets in Afghanistan and Pakistan, resulting in a number of collateral deaths for which it faced widespread criticism. The United States has a huge number of deadly combat drones in its arsenal, such as the RQ-12 Wasp, the MQ-9 Reaper, the X-47A, and the Avenger, to name just a few of these drones that can wreak death and devastation. In January 2020, the United States is widely believed to have used its Reaper drone to assassinate the top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani at the Baghdad airport. Israel claims to have been developing its combat drone technology since the 1970s, and today it boasts of one of the largest fleets of combat drones in the Middle East, including the Hermes 450, the Hermes 900, and the IAI Heron, to name just a few of its combat drones. With these drones, Israel has been striking targets deep inside the Palestinian territories. It was the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict of 2020 that for the very first time highlighted the enormous advantage that drones bring to the battlefield. Armenia had inherited the Tochka and the Scud missiles from the Soviet Union. In 2016, it had purchased the Iskander missiles from Russia, besides the Chinese-made WM-80 multiple launch rocket systems. In contrast, Azerbaijan had used its oil and gas wealth to acquire the Israeli LoRa ballistic missiles. From Turkey, Azerbaijan purchased the Bayraktar TB2 drones. From Israel, it purchased the kamikaze drones, including the Harp, Orbiter, and Sky Striker UAVs. The drones enabled the Azerbaijani forces to locate, track, and strike targets with precise hits far beyond the front lines. It was in this war that the Turkish TB2 Bayraktar drones distinguished themselves as weapons that can change the course of the war. Now, Turkey has used its drones to regularly bomb targets of Kurdish separatists in Iraq and Syria. And even in this ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, Kiev has used the TB2 Bayraktar drones with deadly efficiency against the 40-mile-long convoy of Russian tanks which had laid siege on the Ukrainian capital. The Bayraktar drone has also been deployed by Ethiopia in its civil war in the Tigray province. On the battlefield, drones with their speed stealth and ability to creep up on their targets have to a very large extent blunted the impact of tanks. Modern warfare is changing on a fundamental level. Combined with AI, the possibility of drones carrying out surveillance, target tracking and weapons delivery are almost limitless. Along with drones, electronic warfare has also assumed a whole new significance. This is the science of locating enemy forces by the electronic signals that they send and then isolating them by jamming their communication systems. These are still the early days of drone warfare. But what is clear is that increasingly wars will be fought and won by those who can field superior drones on the battlefield. With the winter about to set in, the Russian strategy to gain advantage on the battlefield is very clear. The Ukrainian counteroffensive has been blunted to an extent by the barrage of the Iranian-manufactured kamikaze drones that Russia has rained down in Ukraine. But the Russian troops are under pressure in Kherson, and just when things appeared that they could not get any worse, both Russia and the United States aren't just indulging in some good old nuclear rhetoric, but they're actually carrying out what they describe as long-planned nuclear exercises. Our next report gets you more details.
Ever since the Kerch Bridge linking the Crimean Peninsula to the mainland Russia was destroyed in the massive bombing, the Russian strategy in Ukraine has now undergone a fundamental change. In the bruising conflict this past week, Moscow is no longer fighting to gain more territory, but instead it has deployed the Iranian Shahed drones to carpet bomb the power infrastructure of Ukraine. According to estimates, nearly 40% of Ukraine's power generation capacity has been knocked out. Even cities such as Lviv in the west of Ukraine that had remained relatively insulated from the Russian missiles have not been spared. Moscow's game plan is extremely clear. This is the preparation to unleash Russia's most decorated and most cruel general in history, General Winter. With just a few weeks before the snow begins to fall, the Ukrainians are being deprived of electricity and the means of heating. People across the war-torn nation are bracing themselves for the bitter winter. They are now collecting firewood to keep themselves warm. In this maternity hospital in central Kyiv, the doctors, nurses and expecting mothers are working out backup plans in case of a total blackout.
We are getting ready. We will save power. We have bought candles. We live on one of the top floors of our building. My husband was planning to buy gas heaters to increase the temperature in the apartment if there is no heating. We have torches powered by power banks.
But it is not just the power generation infrastructure that is being targeted. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has now accused Moscow of planting explosives inside the huge Nova Kakhovka Dam. The dam holds in its volume of water that is equal to the Great Salt in the United States of America. But Russia has rubbished all these allegations. It has accused Kiev of firing rockets at the dam, resulting in damage to the huge reservoir. Blowing up this Soviet-era dam will unleash devastating floods across much of the Kherson region that is presently under the control of the Russians. But Moscow is under pressure in Kherson. The recently appointed ruthless Russian General Surovikin has admitted that Russia is evacuating civilians from Kherson. As the Ukrainian soldiers are pressing ahead with the advantage of the HIMARS rockets supplied by the United States of America.
The intensity of artillery and rocket shelling is quite high. We are not relaxing, but this is a part of our job which we willfully signed up for.
Vladimir Putin last week announced that Russia will not mobilize any more soldiers. But the 300,000 reservists who have been mobilized are presently being trained in combat. They're being trained to be deployed in the battlefield to take on the Ukrainian counter-offensive.
Today they will start practical training, firing at positions on the shooting range. They will be studying the weapons. Those who know the weapons will be refreshing their knowledge. So practically, they will be trained in combat fighting.
Ratcheting up the tensions further, both Russia and the United States have started what they have described as a planned nuclear exercises. These are part of NATO's nuclear military drills dubbed as Steadfast Noon. And the United States will fly its B-52 nuclear bombers over Europe between the 14th till the 30th of October. While Russia is expected to carry out its own set of large-scale nuclear exercises called GROM, the United States claims that its nuclear exercises are meant to make the world a safer place. But with the worsening war in Ukraine and the deafening nuclear rhetoric, it's hard to imagine how nuclear drills such as this can make the world a safer place.
A flurry of ballistic missile launches by North Korea is the clearest indicator that things have escalated on the Korean peninsula. Consider this: since the beginning of this year, Pyongyang has fired an estimated 40 ballistic missiles, including a new hypersonic missile that is considered to be very hard to intercept. The fear now is that North Korea is inching closer towards testing yet another nuclear weapon in the region. So what explains this strident rhetoric and also the increased missile launches by Pyongyang? Our next report gets you more details.
On the 16th of June, North Korea flew 12 of its warplanes, forcing South Korea to immediately scramble about 30 F-15K fighter jets. Pyongyang's warplanes made a rare appearance near the South Korean skies. After the USS Ronald Reagan and its carrier strike group took part in war games for the first time since 2017 along the east coast of the Korean peninsula. Since the 25th of September, Pyongyang, in a game of competitive muscle flexing, has fired ballistic missiles from at least 6 different locations. Escalating things further, on the 4th of October, North Korea fired a ballistic missile over Japan, setting off sirens and sparking panic on the ground. The North Korean missile traveled a distance of 4,500 kilometers before falling into the Pacific Ocean. But worryingly for the United States, the North Korean missile could have struck the U.S. territory of Guam if it had taken a different trajectory. Military analysts have pointed out that North Korean missile launches are getting more complex, undetectable, and therefore even more threatening.
As far as I know, it is the first time. Many call it SLBM. But it's not a submarine-launched missile because it's not launched from a submarine. I'd like to say that North Korea has developed a new missile dubbed ULBM, which means underwater launched ballistic missile.
In September, North Korea passed a new law, giving itself the right to carry out a preemptive nuclear strike. Besides insisting that its nuclear status was irreversible and that there is no further question of any talks or negotiations over denuclearization. And this is not just empty rhetoric. On the 10th of October, Pyongyang tested its short-range ballistic missiles with the claim that it simulated striking South Korea with tactical nuclear weapons. For its part, Seoul hit back by saying that any misstep by Pyongyang will be dealt with sternly.
North Korea's reckless nuclear provocation will face resolute response from our military, as well as our allies and the international community.
What North Korea is resorting to is messaging with its missiles to get the attention of Washington. Joe Biden's administration has responded to this unprecedented level of provocations by Pyongyang by carrying out live-fire missile tests along with South Korea. The only word that Joe Biden has uttered for Kim Jong-un was way back in the month of May, when he had embarked on his first Asia trip as the president.
Thank you.
Even the White House officials have largely remained silent about Washington's approach towards North Korea. What is clear is that the days of big and glitzy one-to-one summits between Kim Jong-un and the American president, as they happened during the tenure of Donald Trump, are unlikely to happen under Biden. Joe Biden is presently occupied with the Russia-Ukraine war, the Chinese belligerence in the Taiwan Strait, and the cost of living crisis back home. But the strategy of ignoring Pyongyang's ballistic missile tests is only shifting the status quo towards a bigger crisis in the Korean peninsula.
Israel has installed robotic weapons at the entrance of the Al Arub refugee camp in the occupied Palestinian territories. And these robotic weapons can fire live ammunition, tear gas, stun grenades, and also what Israel describes as sponge-tipped bullets. But what makes these robotic guns different is the reliance on artificial intelligence to decide on who's to be targeted and with what level of force. Now, Israel claims that this new technology will reduce collateral damage, but the Palestinians fear that this new technology takes away accountability when excesses are committed and is therefore more dangerous and dehumanizing.
This is a robotic gun unlike any other that you may have seen. And what makes it different is that it relies on AI to make the judgment on when to pull the trigger. This robotic gun has been installed atop an Israeli guard tower at the entrance of the Al Arub refugee camp. And it has raised some serious concerns. According to the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, the Israeli forces stormed the Al Arub refugee camp more than any other camp in the West Bank. There is a palpable sense of fear and anxiety as everyday commuters walk beneath the guard tower, with the Israeli soldiers gazing out from behind the security of bulletproof windows.
It fires by itself without any difficulty from the soldier. When he sees a little boy, he presses a button or something and it fires by itself. Also, it is very fast, even faster than the soldiers. And the smell of gas that it releases is stronger than the smell of gas fired by the gunpowders that the army used before. The tear gas bombs that it fires can reach the end of the camp and all the way up there. I have seen it several times.
Although capable of firing live ammunition, for now Israel claims that these robotic guns have been armed with non-lethal ordnance like sponge-tipped bullets. Israeli soldiers insist they have the option of locking the robotic gun onto specific body parts of people, which can reduce the number of casualties. These guns have been built by an Israeli startup company named Smart Shooter, which boasts among its client list a dozen militaries around the world.
This here is the Smash fire control system, which is a computer vision based fire control system based on a camera to enable to highly increase the accuracy of soldiers all over the world and basically greatly reduce the collateral damage and being able to only hit what is necessary.
But the use of robotic guns that rely on AI's judgment on when to pull the trigger is a worrying global trend. It is not possible to fix accountability in the case of excessive use of force, as the decision to pull the trigger is made by artificial intelligence. The United States used this type of gun during its war in Iraq, whereas South Korea is said to have set up a similar contraption along its border with North Korea. In the past few months, there has been a surge in the number of deadly raids that Israel has carried out in Palestinian territories. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, this year has been the deadliest since 2015, with 124 Palestinians killed so far. Israel claims these raids are preemptive, that are calculatedly carried out to prevent future attacks by the Palestinian militant groups. Human rights organizations insist the deployment of robotic guns that rely on AI to decide on when and on whom to pull the trigger will lead to the digital dehumanization of the Palestinian people.
The Ethiopian military has wrested control of 3 towns from the Tigrayan rebels. This protracted conflict that has now dragged on since November 2020 between the Ethiopian government and the rebels has thrown the African country into complete turmoil. Tens of thousands of people have been killed and millions of others have been uprooted from their homes. Now, despite the efforts by the African Union to broker peace, there's been no end to the hostilities. Our next report gets you more details.
The vicious civil war unfolding in the north of Ethiopia has witnessed more violence this week. The Ethiopian army has claimed to have captured several towns after carrying out some devastating airstrikes on the rebels. The two sides are locked in a battle for control in a region that is long perceived to be the key to power in Ethiopia. Sounding the alarm, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned about the rapidly deteriorating situation.
The situation in Ethiopia is spiraling out of control. Violence and destruction have reached alarming levels. The social fabric is being ripped apart. Hostilities in the Tigray region of Ethiopia must end now, including the immediate withdrawal and disengagement of Eritrean armed forces from Ethiopia.
On Tuesday, the 18th of October, the Ethiopian National Defense Force, ENDF, and its allies captured Shire, Alamata and Korem. One of the biggest cities in Tigray, Shire is located about 140 kilometers northwest of Tigray's regional capital, Mekelle. The university town with an airport is strategically placed, and its capture could allow the Ethiopian military wider access to other key towns. Crucially, it is host to tens of thousands of people displaced from other areas by the raging conflict. Once a popular tourist attraction, Tigray has been under a blockade for 17 months now. There are no banking, telephone or internet services, as well as no media access. For the past 2 years, the fortunes of the two sides have constantly changed. In November 2020, the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces took over Mekelle after accusing the TPLF of rebellion. About a year later, Tigrayan forces launched a counter-offensive in the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions, which brought them dangerously close to the federal capital, Addis Ababa. In the latest round of fighting, the federal and allied forces have regained territory in Tigray. Fighting had resumed in the month of August, shattering a 5-month-long truce.
Since 31st of August, we have received numerous reports of civilian casualties and destruction of civilian objects due to airstrikes and artillery strikes in Tigray. Disruptions to communications make it particularly difficult to verify reports, but it is clear that the toll on civilians is utterly staggering.
Both sides have been accused of committing war crimes, including massacres and rape, a charge they have both denied. The prospect of Ethiopian and Eritrean forces launching an offensive to capture Mekelle is once again on the horizon. While the humanitarian crisis in Tigray worsens, international calls to lay down arms and sit at the negotiating table have been largely ignored. This does not bode well for the future of the war-torn African nation and the civilians who are caught in the crosshairs.
Thanks for watching World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any suggestions or comments or feedback, please feel free to tweet to me on the Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.